Welcome back to Under the Influence, where I explore astrology through lived experience, personal reflection, and oh yes, unseen guidance. We've been on a journey. In our first episode, we met Pisces as a doorway, the part of the chart where we are emptied, undone, thinned out so that the unseen can slip through. In the second, we began walking house by house, exploring how those doorways open from Leo through Capricorn. If you haven't listened to those yet, I recommend circling back. The links are in the description because this series builds on itself. Today we continue with rising signs from Aquarius through Cancer. And before we dive in, let's linger on Pisces itself for a moment. Pisces is relentless in its communion. It shows up not when things are going smoothly, but when something shatters, when the plan doesn't hold, when the job, the relationship, the hope you were leaning on collapses beneath you. That's when the tower strikes. And when the disappointment, the heartbreak, the endings you swore you couldn't survive open a doorway you could never have forced yourself. Pisces doesn't come to comfort us when life is working. It comes to undo us when we are convinced nothing will hold us. And in that emptiness, we finally recognize what was there all along. Our ancestors, our unseen king, waiting at the edges of our awareness. The unseen isn't somewhere distance we have to reach. It's what shimmers into view when the noise of the world falls away. And this isn't abstract or optional. With the North Node moving through Pisces now, the collective tide is pulling us all toward that recognition. More and more, we are being emptied of what we thought would sustain us. Structures dissolve, certainties vanish, and we are asked to face the disappointments, the endings, the unravelings not as punishment, but as initiation. The invitation is simple, though never easy. Let the fall reveal the presence that has always been with you. For Aquarius rising, the place where the veil thins is the second house, the house of money, possessions, and self-worth. On paper, this looks almost cruel. The very things we depend on to feel safe are, for them, where dissolution arrives again and again. What others can build and hold, they watch slip through their fingers. Jobs end suddenly, savings drain without warning, partnerships dissolve just when they thought stability was possible. Over and over, Aquarius rising learns the lesson. You cannot build your security the way the world tells you to. This is not punishment. It is the doorway. For Aquarius rising, the second house is where their ancestors come closest, and they do so not by offering stability, but by pulling it away. Each collapse, each loss, each moment of scarcity is an opening, one that strips them of the false comfort of conformity. Because for Aquarius rising, to conform is to betray themselves. Their soul sign up for strangeness, for carrying what is new, disruptive, beyond the frame of what anyone calls normal. And so they're pushed into places where no blueprint exists. Their resources do not come from the expected. Their worth cannot be measured in the usual ways. The temptation, of course, is to run to their Virgo in the 8th house, to seek safety through others, to merge, to strategize, to control joint resources in hopes of avoiding the uncertainty. But this always backfires. The more they cling to what others define as valuable, the more quickly it evaporates. The message is relentless. Your worth is not borrowed. It is not secured through what you shared. It is yours. It is revealed only when you risk trusting the invisible. Aquarius rising's ancestors speak through intuition, through sudden flashes of knowing that arrive without logic or proof. Their task is to listen, even when it makes no sense, even when the world calls them irresponsible, naive, or mad, to buy when others sell, to leap when others hesitate, to follow the tug of inspiration into entirely new forms of sustenance. For them, money appears in unlikely ways. Possessions come and go, yet somehow always just enough arrives to keep them on their path. The aliveness comes not in what they can hold, but in what flows through them. And here lies the paradox. The more they trust this current, the lighter they become. The less they grip, the brighter they shine. Aquarius rising is not meant to build security the old way. They are meant to show us what value looks like when it is liberated from tradition, when it is visionary, alive, fluid, and surprising. Through every loss, every emptied hand, they are being taught that their true worth cannot be diminished. It does not live in what they own. It lives in the unseen inheritance they carry, waiting to be recognized, waiting to pour through them into forms the rest of us haven't even dreamed of yet. For Pisces rising, there is no distance between themselves and the unseen. They are the threshold. The body itself, the way they move, the way they are perceived, the very shape of their presence, is the opening through which their ancestors flow. For others, communion happens in certain corners of life, a relationship, a home, a career. But for Pisces rising, there is no corner. It is everywhere, all the time. The unseen is etched into their skin, stitched into their gaze, humming through their aura. This is both their gift and their burden. To carry the unseen in the first house is to live without the illusion of separation. It means the tides of the invisible world wash constantly over them. Inspiration, imagination, and creativity at times so luminous they feel touched by starlight. They can become living beacons of compassion, channels of music, art, love, and vision that doesn't belong to this world alone. They embody ether, made flesh. And yet the danger is equally great, because the pull of the Virgo in the 7th house is strong. When the overwhelm of their openness becomes too much, they may reach for control, trying to manage others, fix relationships, perfect the balance of give and take. They may think that if they can just keep harmony out there, they will feel steady in here. But this is the trap. The more they micromanage the external, the more they dissolve internally. They risk losing themselves in other people's dramas, identities, and demands until they no longer know where they end and the other begins. Displacement demands masterful awareness, perhaps more than any other, because Pisces rising is not simply invited to recognize the unseen, they embody it. And if they do not learn to honor this truth, they can become unmoored, wandering through life without a sense of direction, purpose, or self. The responsibility is enormous, to carry their ancestor through their own existence and to hold it without trying to control or contain it. But when they embrace this path, the joy is unmatched. Pisces rising can taste the exquisite sweetness of life more fully than anyone else. Not because it is easy, but because it is porous, shimmering, alive. They are meant to dance with mystery, not to pin it down. To live as ether incarnated and to show the rest of us what it looks like to be guided not by the visible world, but by the unseen currents that move beneath it. If they can trust this truth, their lives becomes less about surviving the confusion and more about revealing beauty, compassion, and wonder that the world has forgotten it needs. For Aries rising, the doorway to their ancestors sits just behind them, in the 12th house, the most elusive of all, the place Pisces itself calls home. This is the house of undoing, of surrender, of solitude, of being dissolved into something larger than the self. And though Aries is the first spark of the zodiac, the lone flame that insists, I am, they are also destined to encounter again and again the pull into emptiness, where that flame feels extinguished, where aloneness becomes absolute. This is where their unseen king gather, not in the noise of daily life, not in rituals packaged and sold as pathway to spirit, but in the spaces where Aries rising is stripped bare. Long stretches of isolation, dreams that turn into visitations, sometimes startlingly lucid, unexpected confinement, hospitals, retreats, prisons, even wilderness when no one else is near. Encounters with animals, massive and humbling, that remind them of their own smallness in the great chain of life. It is in these threshold spaces where the world rules dissolve that their ancestors reach through most clearly. The paradox is this: Aries rising cannot control their connection to the unseen. The more they try to do it right, to lean on Virgo in the 6th house, following strict spiritual practices, step-by-step methods, or neat rituals others insist will work, the more they will find themselves blocked. Their king are not interested in formulas. They're interested in Aries' raw willingness to go first, to surrender to the invisible pull that makes no sense, to forge their own way. And this is painful, because it means the Aries rising must walk alone into landscapes no one else has mapped. They will not have the comfort of a mirror or the validation that what they're experiencing makes sense. Their aloneness is not a mistake, it is the pathway. And when they honor it, when they stop trying to explain or package it, they can discover entirely new ways of communing with the unseen, ways no one has ever thought of before. From there, something remarkable happens. What was once only theirs, carried in isolation, can move then into their Virgo 6th house, not as a rigid practice, but as a form of service. They can teach others by living example. This is how you listen when no map exists. This is how you walk with the unseen when nothing around you says it's possible. Aries rising are the pioneers of incarnation. Their ancestors are not asking them to conform. They're asking them to be brave enough to disappear into the silence, into the dream, into the empty space where no one can go with them, and to return with something the rest of us didn't even know was possible. For Taurus rising, the doorway to the ancestors opens in the 11th house, the realm of groups, collectives, and the strange webs of ideas that attempt to hold many voices together. It is also the house of visions, where the impossible dreams become thinkable and sometimes even real. This is where Taurus rising is asked to commune with the unseen, not in the quiet safety of the familiar, but in the unpredictable company of others. And this is not easy for Taurus. Rooted in materiality and stability, they prefer the steady rhythm of their own values. Yet here, their ancestors moved through the complexity of community, through difference, through diversity, through the chaos of competing worldviews. And while this house holds immense potential for Taurus rising to seed their values into collective forms, it is also where they most often feel disillusioned. Because humanity's values, when exposed in groups, often reveal themselves as fractured, distorted, and heavy with trauma. The darkness of the collective is not hidden here, it is amplified. That sorrow, the deep disappointment at what people are capable of, is not a mistake. It is the threshold. It is precisely in the grief of seeing how far the collective strays from true values that their ancestors draw near. Not to have them evangelize, not to save, not to control, but to remind them. Inspiration does not require agreement. Their role is not to fix groups, but to allow their king to flow through them as a spark of beauty, creativity, or vision that subtly reorients the whole. The trap lies in Virgo's 5th house, where Taurus rising might try to perform, to lead, to use their creativity as a way to show people a better way. But when they lean too hard into proving or perfecting, they end up heartbroken by the lack of response or the inevitable collapse of collective ideals. Their power is not in directing the group, but in embodying their king's inspiration without needing anyone's validation. When they embrace this, something astonishing happens. The collective notices. Not because Taurus rising demanded attention, but because their presence carries the undeniable shimmer of the unseen. Their ancestors infused them into whispers of new values into the fabric of group life. The paradox is that the moment they stop trying to belong, they begin to lead. For Taurus rising, joy arrives not in saving humanity, but in walking with their ancestors into the brokenness of the collective and trusting that their very being can alter the dream. For Gemini rising, the doorway to the ancestors opens in the 10th house, the house of visibility, reputation, career, the mark you leave on the world. And here, the unseen refuses to stay hidden. It insists on being spoken through you, sometimes loudly, sometimes at the worst possible moment, and almost always in ways you cannot control. For a Gemini rising, this is disorienting. They are wired to be celebrated for their cleverness, for their words, for the brilliance of their minds and their ability to weave thoughts into dazzling shapes. And yet, when Pisces rules the tent, the applause rarely lands. Recognition slips through their fingers like fog. Careers they thought would define them dissipate or suddenly shift in ways that make no sense. They may feel compelled to share truths that terrify them, ideas from the ancestral realm that the world isn't ready to hear. And the backlash of, or worse, the silence, cuts them in a place no Gemini wants to be cut, their voice. So what do? Often they retreat. Virgo in the 4th pulls them inward, toward family, home, privacy, cleaning, perfecting, nesting, sometimes even into silence. They may confide only in a few trusted souls or keep their ancestral insights tucked away like secret manuscripts in a locker drawer. And yet, the haunting doesn't stop. Memories, visions, words that feel too large for them leak through anyway, demanding space in the very place they most want to control, their public self. This is where the pen sharpens. To be misunderstood, to be dismissed, to be blocked, sometimes literally, from speaking what is moving through them. But it is here, in that disappointment, in that unraveling of their carefully constructed public identity, that the doorway cracks open. The ancestors remind them, your work in the world is not about applause. Your career is not about the neatness of your CV or the clarity of your elevator pitch. You are meant to be known for something more mysterious, more unsettling, more alive than worldly definitions of success. The challenge is immense, to risk letting their ancestors shape their public voice. Even when it seems illogical, risky, or unsafe, to share without guarantees, to recognize that their visibility will always carry an element of the uncanny, that they are called to speak words that may not land right away, but that seed something deeper in the collective. When Gemini rising surrenders to this, they become a different kind of public figure. Not the clever performer, but the oracle who dares to say what others cannot. And though the applause may never look the way they imagine, what comes in its place is far greater. A recognition not of the personality, but of the king moving through them. For Gemini rising, safety will never come from control. It will come from trust. That what the unseen gives them to say, even when it unsettles, is exactly what the world needs to hear. For Cancer rising, the doorway to the ancestors opens in the ninth house, the territory of philosophy, spirituality, foreign lands, and the pursuit of truth beyond the familiar. And yet, for someone who longs for safety, home, and the unknown, this is perhaps the most uncomfortable place for their king to appear. To step beyond the threshold of what feels secure can feel like courting disaster. But it's in here, in this expansion, that their ancestors call. Cancer rising carries an instinctive orientation toward what feels protective. Family, roots, tradition, the comfort of what always has been. So when Pisces rules the ninth, they may resist the invitations of their unseen king, the pull toward journeys that feel too vast, too destabilizing. Instead, they retreat to the Virgo third, the short walk in the park, the friendly chat with a sibling, the lists and errands that keep life manageable, comprehensible. These are grounding and necessary, but they are not the doorway. Their ancestors come closer in the moments when Cancer rising dare to risk the unknown, stepping onto a plane for the first time, reading a text that dismantles everything they thought they believed, standing in a temple far from home with tears in their eyes for reasons they can't explain. And often, this is where disappointment enters too, where trust is broken, where adventures go wrong, where philosophies collapse. It is in that sorrow, in the grief of "I thought this was safe," that Pisces cracks them open and reveals, "You are not alone here. The unseen travels with you." The paradox is sharp. What feels most dangerous to Cancer rising, letting go of the familiar beliefs in order to grow, is exactly what keeps them most protected. Their ancestors want to show them that safety is not only in walls and hearts, but in meaning itself. That the more they open their minds, the more their lives expand, the more truly secure they become. Safety is not shrunk down, it is made bigger. And here's their gift. Once they begin to trust this, Cancer rising becomes a translator between worlds. They can take the vastness of the ninth, the philosophies, the spiritual truths, the cross-cultural encounters, and bring it back to their Virgo third house in practical, grounded ways. They can show their immediate communities that it is safe to change your mind, safe to question what you've been taught, safe to open yourself to possibility. For Cancer rising, the ancestors whisper, "Home is not only behind you, it is also ahead in the wide open unknown." And every time you dare to step out, you discover another room in the house of safety that has always been yours. That brings us to the close of this arc. Walking through each rising sign, what becomes clear is this: we are all wired for the unseen. Every single one of us. It is not a question of whether it is there, but of whether we choose to notice, to welcome, to live in conversation with it. The unseen does not vanish if ignored. It only grows louder, appearing in places we don't expect, in ways we don't always recognize. With the North Node moving through Pisces, that hum is swelling. The invitations are arriving in new, surprising forms. Not in the neat, linear paths or conditioned minds might demand, but in mysterious, roundabout ways that stretches us into surrender. Each of us has a part to play in this unfolding, this slow unraveling of what we thought was solid, so that something richer and more alive can be revealed. My hope is that this series has made that path a little easier for you, that it has offered you language, encouragement, or even just the sense that you're not alone as you learn how your ancestors moved through you. Thank you for listening, for being here, and for letting those doorways open in you. And next week, we'll be back with more.